Hello, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for the Prepare for Practice Expo. In this session, we're going to be focusing on the task of a client intake. So if in your summer associate or your future fall associate positions, you are assigned this task, that you have the resources available to assist. My name is Lynn, and I am a law school account manager in the Colorado and Wyoming territories. Tomorrow, Carissa Peterson will be offering a similar session, and she is a law school account manager in the Texas territory. So for any of the students joining us from our schools, a special hello to you. But let's go ahead and jump into the task of a client intake. If you ask me, this is one of the most important pieces of the client's journey. As an attorney, this is a very time-consuming process, and it's also something that you don't bill out. So you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions that gather the most information to help you determine whether or not this is a situation where you can be of assistance. In addition to that, though, this is also your chance to make a great first impression, to look for any conflicts or issues that might prevent you from taking the case on, but also to help build rapport with your client, help understand their issue, understand what their ultimate goals are, what are they trying to achieve. So we're going to be using today both Lexis Plus and Practical Guidance to find those client intake resources that could be most helpful. All right, so let's get started on Lexis Plus. So in the upper left-hand corner, you can see I'm defaulted to legal research. I'm going to go ahead and search for the phrase, quote unquote, use your quotes, client intake. That's going to automatically search everything on the Lexis platform and pull back all things talking about client intake. By default, you guys already know this, it's going to automatically deposit us into our cases category. I've went down here where it says more, clicked on that little blue link, opened up some additional categories and selected sample forms. This is going to give us a whole bunch of great stuff right here. So I've got a client intake form, I've got new client intake follow-up, all kinds of stuff. But my suggestion to you is to, before clicking into them, come over to where it says practice type and go ahead and apply a filter. You want to make sure that the questions that you're getting on these forms, these examples, are going to be relevant to your client's question or their practice area. So if your client has a tax question or a bankruptcy question or a toxic tort issue that they're dealing with, that you're getting some sample questions to ask that address that specific practice area. Now, I did go ahead and open up a client intake form so that you can see what it looks like. So we've got some basic information. What's your address, your phone number, date of birth, basic intro stuff. But notice you also have more poignant questions. And even number 3 here is asking something specifically about mold infestation. So I can tell that this client intake form is kind of directed more towards some kind of a toxic tort type issue. So that's why I think it's important to apply that practice area filter, just to make sure that the questions that you're getting that are beyond your general basic info are helpful and are going to extract the most useful information from your client. Now, I might also recommend you do that exact same search, client intake in quotes, on Practical Guidance. Once you do that, it's going to pull back everything on the Practical Guidance platform talking about client intake. Now, just kind of taking a quick look in the center of the page, we've got a federal client intake form. We've got a client intake form for a walk-in plaintiff. Further down, I remember seeing a client intake form for somebody who called in on the telephone. There's all kinds of really good stuff here. I did want to draw your attention to this where it says template. So directly under the title of the document, you're going to see a reference to template here. Anytime that you look at the templates, think form. This is an example form that you can use to help with this task. Now, it goes a little bit further than that though. It's not just a form, it's a form with advice. So check this out. I went ahead and clicked into that very first one, client intake form federal. You're going to also see here drafting notes and clauses that are going to be extremely helpful to understand why you might include a specific, section of a contract, of a questionnaire, of an agreement, whatever it might be. The attorneys drafting these templates are providing you with notes as to why the preceding section is important and helpful. In addition to that, they're also giving you various clauses that you can substitute in and out. So here, looking at this very basic client intake form, you got date, name, address. It starts to get into more specific questions. This very first one up here, are you facing any court or filing deadlines? I opened up the drafting note by clicking on the little plus sign, and that's basically saying, hey, this section needs to be included because you're looking for issues maybe with a statute of limitations or a deadline that they need to meet to respond to a complaint that was previously filed. So you can see how this drafting note is kind of explaining why this section needs to be included. But in addition to that, you've also got those alternative or extra clauses that you can substitute in and out if you want. So here we can see date, name, address, date of birth. I opened up the optional clause and it's asking potentially, if you want to include it, for a social security number. It's up to you, but it's giving you some ideas of what you may or may not want to include. The final piece of forms on practical guidance that I wanted to highlight for you is the ability to open this up in Microsoft Word. This is going to allow you to add in extra questions, remove any unnecessary questions, really just tailor it to your client. And that's what's great about Microsoft Word. It's easy to edit. We all know how to do that. One final piece I wanted to give you with the practical guidance platform is to maybe search for the words prospective client. When you search for prospective client, this is going to, as you know, pull back everything on the practical guidance platform addressing that topical issue. So we've got results for prospective client. I went down here under the content type, and I've selected, I only really want to look at templates and checklists. So forms and checklists, right? Notice over here on the right-hand side, I've got a potential letter that I could use and send to my client explaining that there is a conflict and that I'm no longer able to represent them. So that could be useful. Now, if you scroll down even further, you're going to get to a checklist. So number 9 in the list of results is initial considerations on commencing a lawsuit. It's a checklist to make sure that you've dotted those I's and crossed those T's and that all of your ducks are in a row. The final piece of advice that I would give you when doing a client intake is to really dig in and get that due diligence. Research your client. Research the opposing counsel's client. You want to know everything that there is to know. You don't want any surprises at trial. So here with this, I would use the box of dots and just simply jump out to public records. Here I might look for things like property records, marriage and divorce records. I might look for judgments and liens, bankruptcy filings, criminal records, anything at all that I might want to know before we proceed with this litigation. That said, imagine if you are in court and you are representing a client that has a bankruptcy issue and you find out that the month before the client had sold off property to their daughter for $1. That's going to create a big problem. These are things that you want to know before you go to court so you can cut them off at the pass. And that, my friends, is the gist of what I wanted to share with you about the client intake process. I do want to add one final piece of advice. You as a law student do have access to public records in the law schools. However, you need to make sure that there's a legitimate use for using them. So for example, if you are participating in a clinic or you're working on an innocence project, obviously you're going to need to use those public records to research the people involved. That said, outside of a legitimate purpose, the only other use of public records is to just research yourself. So just be mindful, without a legitimate use to kind of dig into other stuff, just focus on yourself. All right, you guys, that's it. That's everything I have to offer in a nutshell on client intake. If you have any questions at all, feel free to pop them into the chat. And if not, then I've provided you with a link tree below that you can jump onto your next session. Thank you again for joining and have a great rest of your day.